We are live. Hi, everyone. And welcome to this super exciting video. Today, as you can see, we're doing a Vin character analysis. So for everyone who is watching, this is going to be full spoilers for Mistborn Era 1, and we're going to be talking about Vin, probably also some other characters. So if you haven't read Mistborn Era 1, hi, and thank you for showing up, but you will be spoiled. So you may want to click away and come back when you have read all of Era 1. And yeah, I'm going to introduce myself and all of my lovely co-hosts. Thank you guys so much for being here. And then we're going to be talking about Vin, who's one of my all-time favorite characters. And I wanted to do my first character analysis on her because I love Vin so much. So you're on my channel. I'm Joanna from Joanna Sosa. I love to talk about fantasy, other books as well, but mostly fantasy. And yeah, Vin is one of my all-time favorite characters. The Mistborn books are my favorite series. The Final Empire is my favorite book of all time. So, I mean, it's just like Mistborn. I love it. So, going on, Sophia, you can go. Otherwise, I'll just...
I'm Sophia from the channel Sophia's Thoughts. I also like to read books, mostly fantasy books, and Vin is one of my favorite characters ever. I can never decide between her and Paladin. But
yes.
I love them both, and I also really enjoy Mistborn Era 1 as well, and I need to keep my mind in the game because I'm currently rereading Rhythm of War, so bear with me.
Get to the other side of the Cosmere.
Yeah, exactly. And at the other end of time as well, like.
That is true.
I am this person here. I am my parents. I'm seeing them for the first time since COVID, so they have terrible internet. So if you lose me, just kick me out. I'm currently rereading Mistborn Era 1. I read it when I was like 13. Don't remember anything, so I'm coming in basically fresh. So there you go.
I'm Hillary with Bookborn, and my channel is all about fantasy stuff. My name Bookborn is a play off of Mistborn, so I'm obviously a huge Mistborn Era 1 fan. It was, other than Wheel of Time, Mistborn Era 1 was my first Brandon Sanderson experience, so like I have a lot of nostalgia for that Era 1. I love Vin as a character. That being said, I do think she's one of the least interesting of Sanderson's characters. That's going to be, well, female character. Let me, just as a quick statement, just because I feel like she is the female character that most follows the strong female character archetype that we see so often in fantasy fiction. And I appreciate that Sanderson has worked hard to represent a wide variety of female identities. And so I do feel like Vin is maybe the most typical of them, but it doesn't make me love her any less. I do love Vin. I think she's perfect for this story.
Hi, I'm Abby from the channel Abby Salter. I think, like the majority of people here, I really like fantasy and reading fantasy books. I read Mistborn back in 2014, 2015 for the first time, and it wasn't like my first adult fantasy, but it was like one of the firsts. And then I reread it over the past 6 months or so. And it felt like it was a new story because I had forgotten everything, including the ending. And so when I got to the ending, I was like, I thought I remembered this. And I hadn't. I don't know. I remembered that Vin and Elend died, but I forgot that Zane became the hero of ages.
Who knows? That's a big thing to forget.
I'd also combined the endings of the Final Empire and the Well of Ascension and put them as a single ending together. So who knows what I was doing in my memory. But having now reread it, my memory is fresh, and I love the trilogy and Vin as a character.
I'm wondering how that worked. Like, the Well of Ascension is a very, like, oh no kind of an ending. So, like, everything was resolved and everything was left open.
Well, I think in my head that they killed the Lord Ruler, and then they were going to go down to the Well of Ascension at the same time and release Ruin.
So you just combined everything.
And so when I got to the ending of the Final Empire, I was like, but they haven't released Ruin. Where's Ruin gone? Like, where's it?
Well, I'm Elle from the channel Elliot Brooks. I feel like everybody's introductions can basically be applied to me too. I also really love fantasy, occasionally read other stuff. I love Mistborn. I don't agree with Hillary. I feel attacked. I feel like I am that basic female character. So I'm just kidding. But I do love Vin a lot. I love her so much. So I'm really excited to talk about her. I'm going to try really hard not to talk over everyone because I get really excited.
I'll defend myself later. Don't it's not as bad as it seems. I don't hate her. I like her.
Hello, everyone. So excited that everyone is here. And yes, we should. I also forget stuff all the time.
I thought my memory was really good. I thought I remembered. And then when I reread them, I was like, oh no, the memory was really bad.
My husband forgets as soon as he's done basically reading a book. He'll forget. And he'll even forget books he's read. So then I'll be describing them because I won't remember the titles. But I'll be like, what's that book you read? Like this happened. And I'll describe the book perfectly. And he'll just be, and then I'll have to go through like Goodreads and then he'll remember. But yeah, you're not alone.
Yeah, I forget as well very easily, which is why when I do live shows on books, I have to read them right before the live show. Otherwise, I'm like, oh, well, what was that again? Don't remember.
I have finished books minutes before a live show before.
I think it's the best way to go about it. I'm reading Long Price Quartet at the moment, and we're doing a Betrayal in Winter live show soon. And I'm like, I should probably just read that right before the live show, otherwise I'll forget everything.
Whereas I'm like, got a plan. Like, it'd just be too stressful. I'd be too stressed.
So I wanted to start at the beginning, as you do, and talk a little bit about Vin's childhood. So this would be about her right before the Final Empire, even before we meet her. We can talk about her a little bit in the first crew that she's in, but yeah, just about everything that happens before. So does anyone have strong feelings, want to start the discussion on Vin's childhood?
Elle, we know you want to. Just do it.
Go for it.
I mean, I definitely think that you almost, like, you obviously know everything so much with her brother, but I feel like the things that happen with her mom are so disturbing, and you really don't get that much of that. It's like she suppresses all of that because it sounds pretty horrifying, everything that happened with her. And it's kind of interesting. I feel like she almost doesn't realize how negative of an impact in a lot of ways her brother has on her, because she sees him as her protector because of, like, that's her other thing to relate to when it comes to family, is what happened with her mom. I wish we could get more. I mean, I know that would be a really, really dark scene, or just few scenes, but I mean, Sanderson's done it in Stormlight, so I would love to see those moments with her mother. I think that could be really interesting.
Like, we don't actually get that much of her childhood. We don't see that much of it. It's just a few like flashbacks to it, but there's not that much that we can really go on of her childhood and her growing up until we see her as, what, 16 in the first book, is it?
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. But she's incredibly young when what happens with her mum and her sister happens. So I think, especially if you're that young and something traumatic happens to you, it goes either one of two ways. You either can't help but remember it really clearly, or you completely block it out. And I feel like she's just completely blocked it out, and she doesn't, I mean, clearly doesn't even know what really happened other than what Reen has told her.
Yeah, I have a quote that go for it, Ben. You can go first.
Oh, I was going to say, it's almost weird after rereading them, it's almost like never mentioned at all. But when it is, it's really casually.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even, she doesn't even blink. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, my mum murdered my sister. And it's like,
yeah.
Maybe you need to unpack a little bit there. It's just like, nah, that's just what happened. Keep going.
And that kind of, I think, is reflected in that scene where all those people that she was a member of their gang at the beginning, and then her and Kelsier find them brutally murdered, and she just kind of is looking around, and he's a little like, I mean, this is horrifying, and this child basically doesn't seem that fazed. And she was like, I wasn't that close to them. And he's like, but still. So
I think she's like desensitized to it. That she's been brought up with it, and so it just seems to be like the norm for her, and she doesn't realize that there is another life out there that's not like this.
Kind of the norm for just Scadrial and Luthadel almost in general. I think it gives you a glimpse into how horrible it is for so many of the Ska too.
Yeah. I actually, what you said, Abby, there, one of the quotes that I wanted to tab and talk about in this live show was, she's thinking, but I am strong. I'm strong. Sorry, I'm really bad at reading out loud in English since it's not my first language. So then she says, that was the irony. The beatings almost didn't hurt anymore. Faureen's frequent abuses had left Vin resilient, while at the same time teaching her how to look pathetic and broken. In a way, the beatings were self-defeating. Bruises and welts mended, but each new lashing left Vin more hardened, stronger. And so at the same time, she's strong, but she is desensitized to everything that's happened to her. And I think you see that in that scene where she sees everyone butchered and she's like, Which I also like what Grace is saying. It seems like she's trying to deal with it by making it seem more like a casual thing or even like compartmentalized. So yeah, I agree.
That is why I think, I mean, we're not talking about this yet, but later, Vin and Valet's, I always said valet, so I guess I've been saying that wrong. But Vin and Valet's kind of, it's still Vin, but she is exploring, I feel like, different emotional avenues by putting on this other person. And so Vin is the one who's had to deal with this brutal murder of so many people in her life and not trusting anyone and being on her own. And then she kind of sometimes becomes even more emotional as Valette. And I feel like it is because she has been able to try on a new skin, so to speak, and try as be a different person. And that is one of, for me, my favorite parts of Vin is this exploration of herself through a different skin, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if Sanderson intended to do this, but something I really like about something you're saying that I'm kind of going off of that is she also explores being more, stereotypically feminine in that personality. And so often, like women are seen as weaker, or to show more emotion is considered a weakness. And it's almost like she's learning it's not a weakness to see those things and to deal with those things, and then understand that like that's a part of who you are, and you're allowed to process that, and you're allowed to feel things too. And I really like that arc for her. It's not just a matter of the emotional trauma she's gone through, but just the understanding that she can be like a happier person, or she can be somebody who appreciates like the softer things in life. She doesn't have to like hate perfume and things like that. I don't know. It's
You know what? I agree. I think sorry, Abby, you go.
I like it in Well of Ascension, where she's trying to like grapple with the fact that she has been Valette and she liked being Valette and part of that society, but she's also Vin, who has grown up with the gangs and like been just that, and trying to sort of combine those two aspects of her personality and realizing that she can be both.
It's like imposter syndrome.
Yeah, and I think actually, I feel like it must be intentional, because I feel like Sanderson does this a lot. I particularly liked how he did it with Ciri and Warbreaker, and I won't talk about that just because it's a different book. But he often does this strong female character who also explores femininity, which is something that a lot of good fighting female characters aren't allowed to explore. They must be male-like to be a fighter. And so this duality between her, Vin, and Valette is something I feel like a lot of women go through, or at least I did, where I was this engineer and I liked a lot of male-centered activities as a child. And so then I started eschewing femininity, and then going through this exploration of like, well, I can be both. And seeing that expressed through her story, I think is something a lot of people can relate to.
I think that's perfect. I think that's why I relate to Vin so much as well, because I grew up, so my mom was a single mom, and I felt like I had to be like a bit more tough, and so because people always mocked me and called me a lot of names, and so I put on this skin of like being so tough and not letting anything come to me, and then that made it that I also dressed, I didn't embrace any feminine things, and then when I started realizing, hey, I can be both, and I think that's why I love Vin so much, because you see that, and I see myself in her in that aspect. And I think, Elle, you've said on your channel that before as well, haven't you?
Yeah, almost exactly. I mean, it's interesting how things in Ben, what's it like for you? But
I was going to say, as a man, it's really, when I first read Mistborn when I was like 13, I think I did like all 13-year-old boys do, and go, oh, Kelsier is so cool. I don't care about Vin. Give me more Kelsier. And then rereading it now, I was like, oh, that's incredibly awful. You do not want to be Kelsier ever.
and Unless you're
So now
Alan.
reading it.
Well, you know what, Ben? I think a lot of people go through that though, because
Have I gone,
Kelsier
or-
is still. Kelsier's amazing.
You're back.
Keep going.
You're back. But you're frozen again.
He froze, so I thought he was done talking.
No, carry on.
I was gonna say I love Kelsier too. I love him, but it is interesting that when you reread Mistborn, all of a sudden you're like, oh, Kelsier isn't a good person. Somehow he tricks you that first time around. It's not just you.
Well, on my reread of The Final Empire, I for some reason I thought Kelsier died like midway through, and so the whole book I was like, "Why is Kelsier not dead yet?" Because I knew it was coming as well. I was like, "Kelsier's got to die soon. He's got to die soon." And then it wasn't like it was right at the end that he dies, and I was like, "Oh."
And yeah, I appreciate that comment as well, Gregory, because I think just in general, people see having emotions as a weakness, or I mean, not to like harp on the same point, but typically it's like women are seen as the more emotional ones, and then a lot of things to do with women are seen as like lesser or weaker. And then you have just a whole bunch of people where women feel like they can't express their emotions because then they're like proving everyone right. And men feel like they can't express their emotions because then like they're weak. And then nobody's communicating or ever saying how they actually feel. And I like that Vin, I mean, I know we have other talking points that we'll get to, but that's something you see her throughout the whole series, like even struggling to communicate to the people she cares about most, or constantly thinking like, not believing when they say how they feel. She's just like, oh no, that can't be right.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know it goes into like trust issues and things like that as well, but I just think it's a good point that like everybody feels like they can't say anything, and then Kelsier's like over here being all the emotions all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
for
feel
sure.
like it's interesting how she uses her time as the let to start to realize that a lot of the things that have happened to her in her childhood are not normal and are not just acceptable, and that she can feel a certain way about them. And I think that that really comes out in that moment where she explodes at the crew and is like, you aren't Scar, you don't know what it's like to be Scar, you're really just, you know, nobles with less money. Like you don't know what it's like to live that life. And I know that Elle, you really like that scene as well, and I also really do, because I think that it's her moment to kind of show them like you're trying to save these people, but you don't really understand what we've been through.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
then I think in that scene too, there's something about the fact that she immediately feels like she wasn't supposed to do that, and they're all going to leave her now. And then, you know, she has this immediate fear because like, well, I showed an emotion and I confronted them and I said something, and now they're all going to hate me, and they're going to, I'm wording it poorly. That's not exact. She doesn't think like they're all going to hate me now, but kind of along those lines. And she's just so used to being abandoned or nobody actually caring that she thinks as soon as she shows anything, any kind of emotion, because she's so used to hiding, that it's a bad thing. And then it's like that moment with her and Kelsier after is, I feel like, one of the best moments between them. But this isn't about Kelsier.
Well, but I think everyone is saying like one of Vin's most powerful arcs, and whether you're, you know, whatever your gender identity is that you can identify with, is she is someone who's had to put on a shell for so long, it becomes her. And a lot of her journey in Mistborn is trying to negotiate between these two selves. And will people leave me if they know who I really am? And I think we all go through that at some point. We all put on a front to people, and I think it's very relatable. And even in Well of Ascension, you know, I hate a love triangle. I'll just put that out there. But I actually quite like the Well of Ascension. Zane, that's his name, right? Zane.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Zane and Elend, because it's less of a love triangle and more of a physical manifestation of her inner turmoil. Do I go with the side of me that is about fighting and survival, or do I reach a higher ideal, which may be changing or accepting something else about who I am that's not my past? And I think that theme is just like such a relatable theme for anybody who reads.
I agree with everything you said, but I also almost dislike Zane for that reason, because it's like, to me, a little on the nose. Like, he's so obviously the like opposite of Elend, and it's like her different personalities. And I almost wish, because he had the potential to be so compelling. I feel like people either hate Zane because they're like, why is he even in this? Or they love Zane. They're like, I wish we could have gotten more of him. And I think I would have liked way more of Zane because he had so much potential to be so fascinating, but he was almost like a plot device for Vin's character growth, as opposed to just being this really interesting, super well fleshed out character that we could have dived into. I almost wish we could have been introduced to him. There probably wouldn't have been time, but like in book 1 and been like, who's this interesting fella? That would have been kind of cool.
Yeah, maybe you're saying like he needed to be a little bit more subtle, like maybe have a little bit more nuance in his character.
Maybe. I mean, I liked how off the walls he was, but I do feel like it was almost so obviously these two sides of Vin. And I would maybe... What was that?
He's a very cliche kind of character. It's not just like he's the bad boy, he's also the brother.
I think
I'm anti-Zane, but I like the function he plays in her journey. I agree with Elle that it probably could have been done with a lot more subtlety, but I do like the idea of it.
I never even considered it really a love triangle. I never really thought like Vin's really wondering if she should be with Zane because she didn't love him, in my opinion. I don't think she ever had a romantic feelings. It was more of the like that part of her and wondering, should I be more with someone like this? Am I just a weapon all the time? Whenever he would say like, you're just a weapon for Elend, I'm like, shut up, don't listen to him because he's so stupid.
No Twilight from Sanderson. I think also because at that point Elend wasn't Mistborn yet, and so he could not understand her, or she felt at least that he could not understand. And then she saw Zane, and she's like, he knows what it's like to have these powers. He knows what it's like to literally, you can be a weapon if needs be, which we were talking about right before we went live, when she does all that stuff when she is a weapon. And so I think I liked seeing that, because sometimes you feel like you should belong with some people because they have so many things that are similar to you, but sometimes it's just toxic and you just need to be with the people who are there, who may challenge you, but also will help you become better and stronger with things that you struggle with personally.
I feel like nothing makes me realize that I'm glad for people who are different than me than when I'm playing video games and like online and I play with someone who plays like me and I'm like, I hate myself because this person is driving me crazy. So yeah, it's good to have other personalities around you.
Yeah, that's me when I'm driving.
Yes, that too.
Rage road is a thing, guys. Wait, road rage. Rage road? What?
I was wondering, I'm like, is this said differently in different places?
I don't know. I make up my own rules when I speak English sometimes.
And when you're driving.
And when I drive, yeah. Oh, yeah. So did we still want to talk about stuff about her childhood, or did we want to go into her discovering that she's a Mistborn and training with Kelsier and joining the crew?
Should we move on?
Yeah, we can move on. So it's like a mix of these 2 points. So her discovering her powers, training with Kelsier, which we've talked a little bit about, and then joining the crew and trusting the crew, which is the trust issues that we were talking about earlier. So,
I mean, I just love as a whole, like when people discover the powers and like the training with like learning the skills. I find it such a fun part of reading. And like the way that Vin was good at it because she had been using allomancy for years without even realizing it, but it was also a lot of training for her, so you could see that she was trying. It wasn't just like she suddenly could do everything, even though she was very good at it.
Okay, Ben has left us. He'll be in the chat since
his internet. Ben, I'm sorry. We need you, Ben.
The only man.
The male perspective.
We have to interrupt for just a second. We did a Mistborn video on World Hoppers and Alan was the only man there, and some person commented, like, soon Alan, you'll realize Mistborn is just a girl series and like just look, and it's like, okay, sure, sir.
You know what's funny, Elle, is that's one thing I love about Mistborn is that is a very perception I have an issue with in life in general, that stories about female characters are marketed to girls and stories about boys are marketed to everyone. And I have always found surprising that actually I find Mistborn to be very male-centered. Most of my male Sanderson fans love Mistborn. And so I appreciate that Sanderson was able to write in a way that I don't know what I'm trying to say, but
feminine experiences, as we were
Yeah.
discussing before, but still has. I mean, it's because it's great.
Appeal.
That's
because
why.
it's great. And
I
reading about
agree,
female
they're
characters
really-
is just like reading about male characters. They're both great and have a place in everybody's zeitgeist of experience. But anyway, that's all.
What were you
There
gonna
are
say,
really
Sophia?
only 3 female characters in Mistborn. Anyway, so
Yeah. But
Which
one,
Sanderson has
one
said
of
he
the main
regrets.
perspectives, but
it's just there's a girl on the cover, and sometimes some of the covers she's in a dress, so this must be for women.
Some
I
people.
want to add to what Abby was saying about like the training montage and stuff. Is training montages can be tricky because, or not even a montage, but just these training moments throughout stories, because sometimes they can be really boring. And I think what is helpful is that the magic system is so interesting that you're constantly like, you know, you get that scene with Kelsier early where you're like, I don't know what I'm reading, where he's, you know, he's going and just murdering a bunch of nobles, but that gives you a sneak peek. And I apologize to compare this to video games, but it's like some video games where you start with all your powers and then you're like stripped of them, or you go to a character who doesn't have any of those powers and then you're like, I want to be able to do all those moves that I could do at the beginning. How do I do that? And I think that that's kind of what he does when he introduces the magic in Vin's training. However, I can also see for some people who are like, it feels like a tutorial. It absolutely does. It's a little straightforward. So it's not the most organic, like we're discovering it. It's really, truly like Vin doesn't know, so you don't know, so I'll explain it to you, which I liked because it was too, I would have been too complex, I think, to try to subtly explain everything.
But I think he brings in the subtleties when she gets to train with the individual members of the crew to be strong with those individual medals that she then uses. And those were some of the best moments when she learns. Also, I think it's with Breeze. I sometimes get them confused. I'm sorry. Where she learns that emotional elements. He's not just like, you know, I want you to feel this. It's like knowing what everyone's feeling and sometimes pulling away what they're feeling. And I just love that as well.
And I'll add, sorry, that I think that there's good character moments too, like the one with Marsh where she's learning more about how he uses his as a misting. I think that's a really good scene. And she's kind of like seeing a glimpse into Kelsier and their history. And so you're right. I think those moments are where you get more, not just like the magic is more subtle, but then you're getting these character moments which make those scenes not feel just like a tutorial.
Yeah. And wait, Marsh is the one who uses, right, he can pierce like, I mean, she learns that she can pierce copper clouds with him, right? I think, isn't it?
yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Which is very interesting because we'll talk about the hemalurgic spike, later. But I thought that was really interesting when you said, okay, what's Kelsier burning now? And then even Marsh was like, whoa, how can you do this? And yeah, how she's very strong, and you see those things there already.
Yeah, I actually, Vin and Kelsier's mentor relationship is one of my very favorite things about Mistborn. It's probably one of my favorite relationships in the entire Cosmere for whatever reason. I just really like this mentor, but also a little father-daughter. Like it kind of has this blurred lines. Now, some people think it's romantic. I cannot understand that. It has never seemed that way to me at all. So I don't know if any of you felt that way, but I always saw it as a very like father-mentor. And what I like about it is that Kelsier is a very flawed individual. So it's like very interesting to see him and Vin have to deal with their kind of joint trauma, but also learn and grow with each other, because it's not as simple as Kelsier teaching Vin. She is also kind of contributing to this relationship. I don't know. I've always found it very, very interesting.
I think she contributes to his growth too. Like there's an innocence and almost an idealistic side of her. In a sense, even though she's perfectly willing to look at the world and see how awful it is, she's still always hoping, not just for the good of the Ska, but like she believes in the goodness of everyone. And I feel like you see Kelsier, like when he saves Ellen and he's like, gosh darn it,
Yes.
why does it have to make me care about some of the nobles? But yeah, with the romantic thing, just to kind of answer, I think that's a good way to see it to a big brother-sister relationship, is that, I mean, people have even said they wish that Geralt and Ciri had something. So people ship all sorts of things, which is fine. You're like fiction. But I think that there's one moment where Breeze in the Well of Ascension even asks her, like, well, surely you must have like sort of had a crush on him at one point. I mean, he's good looking, he's charming. And she's like, because Ellen's right there and he's already struggling to feel like he's filling Kelsier's shoes and nobody believes in him. And now you have Breeze over here being like, you probably had the hots for Kelsier too, right? He's like, no, I didn't, Breeze. What are you talking about? Just because you like him young. That's what he had going on.
I just never thought like no, just no, like it's a mentor or like brother sister relationship. There's nothing romantic there.
Do you think it could be because it's marketed in some places it's marketed as YA, so people expected that?
I don't know, because I never I feel like it wasn't marketed, and this could just be where I'm at. I don't think it was marketed as YA until recently, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know.
I think it was because I bought the YA versions because I do like the covers better than the regular covers. And I think I bought these in like, I had read it. I think I bought these 3 years after I read it. So like maybe 2015. So it's been a little bit of time since they've been started marketing as YA. So I don't know, but I think I've heard, anyway, to Elle's point, I think I heard people thought Kelsier was romantic before they were marketed as YA for whatever reason on the internet. I don't know why they want that cursed ship, but everyone has one. So every book does.
I mean, there are, like age gap romances and stuff, so it's not totally unrealistic. But I mean, it's not. I think it only gets gross if you see her as a daughter and then think that they should still be shipped. Then that's kind of weird.
Then it's weird.
But it's like, I mean, when I was first reading it,
Vin is in a relationship with Elend. That's the only pairing for me. Like, it's them two together, and that's it.
No Zane, no Kelsier, no Zane.
Or Kelsier and Zane are both mentor figures, and that's that.
Yeah. Or like Alan would say, Vin and the Lord Ruler have a summer fling, so that's Alan's ship.
I think, and also Kelsier's wife is so present in the first novel. I feel like that's also why for me, because there's this whole storyline about this betrayal and that Kelsier is still very clearly wrestling with that. I also think that takes away the romantic tension, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think when you're first introduced to them, because it is made known that like Kelsier is this charming, charismatic guy, and he takes this girl under his wing, and it's like, what's the story about the girl? It's like the exact plot line, My Fair Lady. I can see where if somebody thought initially like that's where it was going, but then like you're saying, there's his wife who he's constantly talking about loving very much. And then there's Vin, like just being so much younger. And then he thinks of her as a daughter. And it's like, if we'd ever had a daughter, I'd like to think she's like you. And that's when it'd be like, but also I really like you romantically. Would have been
I was really
Speaking
sad
of his
about-
wife. Oh, sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say, I always feel really sad about that final moment that Vin and Kelsier actually had, because like she's still really trying to learn how to be with other people, and he's all, you still have a lot to learn about friendship. I'm like, yes, she does, because this is the first time in her life that she's ever had friends. Like, you can't judge her for that. And then they never get to speak again, and it's so sad.
That is so sad. But even sadder is that she never gets to talk to Tensoon again. That breaks my heart. Every time I think about it, I cry. So
No, yes, Tensoon is another favorite in the Cosmere. In fact, most of my favorite characters in the Cosmere come from Mistborn. So anyway, but that broke my heart. The first time I read the third book, I was like, what do you mean that they never see each other again? It's absolutely unacceptable.
yeah.
There's that
cried.
scene where she just like starts like petting him, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like,
Not sure how I feel about
Yes.
I love that scene.
I love that. I feel like because the situation with Tensoon, it's another one where she learns to trust someone who then betrays her, but then doesn't. And it's just the way she acts and the way she then realizes that Tensoon was there. I don't know. Their relationship is one of my favorites. I love Tensoon.
I love Tensoon.
Seeing as the whole prompt for this particular talking part is trust, I love that he was somebody who got to know her so well, unlike really anyone else, because he saw her, he was able to like kind of keep up with her. He was supposed to protect her, and then he was kind of betraying her, but he almost found a way to kind of go against that, and she didn't blame him for it. But like he did genuinely care about her, and she kind of showed him like you can have like almost the way she started to show Kelsier.
Yeah.
There's goodness in people. She almost shows that to Tensoon, and then their bond is like almost the purest. Like
I'm gonna cry. I love
how many of us would be the dog either. We're all just like, oh.
But I think one of my favorite moments in all of Mistborn is when they talk and Tensoon says something along the lines of, you know, when the masters are so cruel and they hit you because they know that they can, and you will the next day be there to serve them your breakfast, and they can break your bones and you will be there again. And she's like, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. And every time I read that passage, I cry. I literally have tears in my eyes right now. So it's like, it's such a good moment.
I think
people being hurt together.
Yeah, that's when you're saying it on the row like that. Mistborn's really about people finding similarities in their differences, right? Finding shared experience and using that to grow friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Her and Zane. I mean, I know we're not talking. Oh, let's see what.
Yeah. What about Zane?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Okay.
The symbolism of Vin reverting back to trousers and shirts and well of ascension rather than dresses is both overt but better and solid than Zane.
Just the outfit.
And then contrast that with when in Hero of Ages, it's actually her suggestion that they get all dolled up and go to the ball.
Yeah.
Well, crash the ball, but
they really do. They come in, they're like, "That's right, we're the stars here." And then like she has that moment too where she's like, "These women think Elend's good looking. I liked him before he was super hot, man." Good for you, Vin. I'm glad that you love him with your heart and not your eyes only.
Oh boy. Which because you bring up Elend, wait, guys can go ahead. I just had a quote that I found earlier and I just need to find it again. So you guys can go ahead and talk.
On the whole like trust stuff, who do you think besides Tensoon? I really loved her relationship with Sazed. I feel like her relationship with Sazed is also so pure as well. I mean, I feel like other relationships, I know we're not talking about Elend because I think we have a whole thing about her and Elend, right? Yeah. But her and Sazed, I love the two of them together. And it's so strange how Sazed being so like almost like servant-like, because that's what his people are. I mean, did you guys see that he was the Hero of Ages? I just feel like even if you're like, I don't know if it's Vin. Is it Vin? It seems like it would be Vin.
But even on my reread, I was shocked.
Yeah, it's got Abby.
But it's almost like the whole book, he's almost like serving everyone else. And so you almost like can't help but not see him. I don't know. Like it should have been obvious, you know, but I don't think it was.
Yeah, oh man, I loved that ending. And what I loved about it is that I think it's a lot of us read the whole novel thinking Vin was the Hero of Ages because she was chosen by preservation and she acts like such a hero. And it was cool that Vin is a hero. I mean, she is the hero of Mistborn, but Sazed is the Hero of Ages. Like just that, I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but that kind of weird subversion is, I think the ending of Hero of Ages is one of the best endings to a fantasy trilogy of all times.
I agree.
Because of that, because of this subversion and how there were clues. Like Elle said, like we should have known, but we didn't.
Yeah. People are saying
that. The whole series starts with that subversion. It starts with what does the bad guy want?
Yeah.
And then we end up, and like we shouldn't be surprised that it ended the way that it did. And yet I read it and was like, did I read that right? That's not right.
As it was happening, I was like, wait, what? And like how I was like, wow, my mind was blown at that. And it's so almost at the very end too. Like he waits till the last minute to be like,
and he didn't even figure it out until like it's happening.
Yeah,
it's so funny because he's like, Lady Vin, where's Lady Vin? And I'm like, no, go, yes, you do it. You know?
I know, and that's like so sweet, typical Sazed, thinking like it can't be me.
I love it. So I think Abby and Sophia know this, but when I read the first time, so I read Final Empire 4 times before I moved on to the rest of the series. And because I loved it so much, you know, it's just I love these characters. And then
did you see that Tensoon is already mentioned in book 1?
I saw it on when I reread the Final Empire whilst having read the first books once. Yes, I did. than I did. I was like, oh, it's in soon. So I had watched a video, and someone had said in that video that Elend was the hero of ages, and I was like, spoilers, and I clicked out. And so then the whole time when I was first reading them, I was like, he's the hero of ages. He doesn't even deserve it because he's not even a Mistborn. And then, oh, now he's a Mistborn. Of course he's a Mistborn. So I was so angry. And then at the end, I was like, oh, I love this ending. This is so good.
Like, you get his head cut off, and you're like, no.
I didn't believe it. You know what? I was like, no, it's gonna get re-glued together in some fashion.
You know, that's really interesting. Forming your opinion, having a wrong spoiler, reading the novel probably completely changed your perception of a lot of events that happened.
Absolutely. This
I'm
is Sophia.
very happy that Elend wasn't the hero of ages, because I was worried when you finish Will of Ascension. You're like, okay, Elend is now a Mistborn. What does this mean? And then finding out that he doesn't have the same skills as Vin, and like what this means for him. I like that he wasn't as strong as Vin, and that although he was a Mistborn, he wasn't like a super Mistborn.
Yeah.
I have a question. If I'm not mistaken, there's no like concrete answer that we've been shown yet as to why Vin was able to take in the mists and everything, right? That's like one of the mysteries of the Cosmere, is why was she and no one else before?
I thought we did find that out in Secret History. Am I wrong about that? Can we spoil Secret History? Is that allowed?
I mean, I haven't read Secret History.
Yeah.
You haven't read Secret History. Okay, well then I will say this in a way that does not put spoilers. There is a conversation with Preservation, or you get to see the past when Preservation is still alive in Secret History. And I thought that Preservation said that they chose Vin. So I thought it was Preservation's choice to give Vin the mists. That was his thing. But I don't quote me on that, but that's what I always assume, that she could take in the mist because Preservation chose her to do that. Like he was giving her his power as a dying god. Is that right?
Yeah, and she also takes on some of his powers at the at the well of Ascension in the second book as well. So that's kind of priming her to do it. And of course, it happens at the end of the Final Empire as well. So that was always my understanding as well, Hilary, is that he'd chosen her like basically from when she was born.
That is something I have to look at again.
But speaking of Abby, what are you doing not reading The Secret History? It's incredible.
I thought I had to read Era 2 first.
You do.
Yeah.
You don't. It came out before Era 2 was done, though. It came out after Alloy of Law.
It has minor spoilers for
A reveal.
Shadows of Self.
Oh, it came out after Shadows of Self. Okay, it did come out of Shadows of Self.
and I never finished Shadows of Self. I'm about 200 pages in and have been for like 3 years. I read Alloy of Law, finished Alloy of Law, and then I just never made it through Shadows of Self. And so now I need to probably like reread the whole thing.
And it doesn't matter if it spoils it. Just go for Secret History.
Yeah, I mean,
I do want to finish Era 2. I do. It's just been
delayed. I don't think it can have spoilers for Bands of Mourning, because I'm almost positive it came out before Bands of Mourning.
No, I don't. Well, hang on. I'll go and get my copy.
I'm going to Google it. I think Bands of Mourning has spoilers for Secret History. Okay.
But
I'm going to look up the Secret History published date.
I did a video and I got a comment saying that there are differences in Hero of Ages between the UK or between different editions. Recently.
Again?
Oh, came out the same day as Bands of Mourning. I read it before Bands of Mourning. I know that because I was so excited about it.
Okay.
Is there
It was
any
released
There
2016.
are
like
major spoilers for the original Mistborn trilogy and minor spoilers for the Bands of Mourning.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Which I
I'm
can,
reading
yeah,
through.
I can see that. I can see that.
It's
I'm
weird though,
surprised
because it's
at
almost like Bands of Mourning could also be considered a spoiler for Secret History, depending on how you think about it. You know what I mean?
It's
Anyway.
like how everybody's like, you have to read Warbreaker before you read Words of Radiance, because there's like people that show up, and I'm like, okay, or you can read Stormlight, and then you'll see those people in
And it's great.
it can go either way.
Secret History worth it. It's probably one of my favorite novellas. It's so good.
So many people hate it.
Really? Okay. Well, Kelsier. Anyway.
Well,
I ruined it. I'm sorry. I thought I wouldn't. And I just ruined it. It's
We need
fine.
a little more insight into like what is happening during the events of Mistborn.
Yeah, I guess I should say it is not my favorite written. Like, I love Emperor's Soul way more when we're talking about written, but the Cosmere secrets and knowledge that come out of Secret History have been my favorite of any of the novellas.
I just feel like the whole thing is a cartoon. I don't like so much of it.
This is awesome.
But
Anyway.
I'm very picky. If you're gonna have like any additional information or characters or scenes, to me, it's very hard for it to not feel like fan fiction. You know, not that I have anything against fan fiction, but in my head, I'm like, that was Mistborn. The first era is over. Second era doesn't really change things, so that's fine. But then when you're like, let's actually, because like there's a whole scene in one of the books, and again, like I'm gonna be really vague to avoid spoilers, but there's a whole scene where Vin is like trusting her gut in the Hero of Ages, and then Secret History is like, was it her gut or was it actually this like other thing? And I'm like, I like that because
I
that's
can
so
see
part
hating that.
so part of like who Vin is like she's always trusting her gut. So for it to be this like question, but that's a minor thing. I can't really say the really intense thing that I hate, but there's a scene and I just think it's cheesy and I don't like it.
I'm so excited when I read it to discuss with you guys to see
Where you
how I
fall.
feel about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can actually see what Elle's saying when I see the book that way.
But I get
It was just because of the characters in there and the Cosmere connection is why I love it so much. But I like what they said. Who said it? That Secret History is the most Cosmere aware before Rhythm of War. Totally.
Yeah. Rhythm of War is like, I know I've always said you don't have to read the other books, but like you kind of have to now.
Yeah.
To fully appreciate, because I mean, as soon as you start it, you're like, they're talking about allomancy, or they're talking about Scadrial, or this is. I guess I can. Well, never mind. I probably should not say things because for spoilers for that. But they reference.
I'm rereading Rhythm of War now, and
Didn't you already reread it?
Sorry.
Haven't you already read it twice?
No, this is the second time.
Oh, okay.
And I'm specifically looking out for Cosmere like implications. I actually watched your 2 videos on it, Hillary, as kind of prep.
Thank you.
For the reread. And I'm like using different coloured tabs, so like blue for Scadrial because blue on the covers. There are so many blue tabs. It's wild. Like so many blue tabs.
Scadrial's
he said that Wax and Wayne 4 had to come out before Stormlight Archive 5, which is like,
I'm so excited.
Well, yeah,
I will get caught up. I will.
Turning
Slowly.
into the Avengers.
Yeah, it is kind of like that. You
yeah.
have to go through everything. Should we go back to Vin?
yeah. Sorry.
No problem. I love getting off track, but then I missed out so many. Well, not so many points.
I do want to say one thing too.
Yeah.
So my friend sent me this thing from Reddit where they weren't necessarily being rude toward like typical booktube, which is a lot of times fantasy, but they were saying they wanted people who are more analytical and not so superfluous. And I was like, okay, but the way to dissect fantasy is stuff like this, like these conversations, going over magic systems, going over all of the world building details. It's not so much like the implications to real world things, the way you would get in something like literary fiction, references to real things. So I'm just like, it's a genre difference. I don't know. So I feel like, sorry, I don't know who is echoing, but I just feel like this is how you are analytical in fantasy stuff. Sorry, everybody's like hitting their mute buttons.
Just
I
making
got
sure.
headphones. I know it's not me.
Yeah, which is why I wanted to do this. Like when I wanted to do my this video, I wanted to do it on my own. It's like, okay, let's talk about Vin because I love Vin. And I thought, no, it's so much better when you have so many different opinions to pull from in the comments, which is why I wanted to do it live because then you have the comments from people who see things differently. And I know, for example, one of my friends, Evie, she doesn't like Vin, and I know she's on her own live show right now, but she'll probably comment later. And it's just so interesting to see other people and how they interpret things, and then you get so much more out of it when you talk with other people about it, which is why I think.
And I think fantasy does have a relation on the real world as well. Like just because it's fantasy in a different world, you can definitely relate to it and apply it to real world scenarios. Like the struggles that Vin has been through from her childhood, that still happens in the real world. And so just because it's a fantasy book doesn't mean that it can't be applied.
For sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't want to get off topic, but like, yeah, Elle, that's my least favorite thing that people say. Like, all of the best works have been metaphorical, and fantasy is nothing if metaphors for the real world. I mean, think of how people feel about Kaladin. I mean,
Right.
Kaladin has so many, just so many personality traits that people super identify with. And sure, he's a windrunner, but like that doesn't change, his struggles with depression or, all those things. So, yeah.
It's just that, like, I know my husband reads a lot of literary fiction, and the references are directly, it's almost like a trivia game for intellectuals, like how much can you spot? There's like a part where they're referencing jazz stuff, and Sean was like, I got that one, and he felt really proud of himself. But you're not going to be able to do that with fantasy as far as, I mean, some you are, right? Like, I know Senlin Ascends is definitely one that I feel like is referencing kind of, there's a whole part, we don't need to get into Senlin Ascends, but anyway, it's like, yes, there are some that might be more directly relating to things going on now or things going on in the past. And then there are some, like Hillary, you're saying, that are more, I guess, not vague, but...
Sorry, I saw Ben's comment and it's got me laughing.
I
know. But just like what you were saying, Hillary, where there are certain aspects that a lot of people can identify. And I think Kaladin is one of my favorite characters across any genre, any book, Vin too. But Kaladin's depression is just so accurate. Yeah. Talking to people who don't have depression, like when they're like, when's Kaladin gonna like get over it though? I thought he already got over this. Like, that's not how it works.
No. Yeah. That's why his representation is so amazing. But anyway, this is about Vin, but yes. Anyway, agreed.
We can do a Kaladin talk one time as well, because he's also one of my favorite characters.
Yes, please.
Oh, I love Kaladin. I mean, but I think that's why I love Vin so much, because what I was telling you guys earlier, from my childhood, my childhood was completely different from Vin's. Obviously, my mom didn't try to murder my sister to give me more powers, but I mean, it's just that, when you have a childhood that sometimes you don't have the best memories from, or where you have things that really hurt you and then you don't know if you can trust people. For example, and I will try not to get too much into detail about my life, but my grandfather was someone who was very physically abusive towards his children, his wife, everyone. And then you start wondering, can you trust other adults? Can you trust men in particular? In my case, for example, and seeing Vin, also how she puts distance immediately to everyone in the beginning. I was that kid that as soon as I met someone, I was like, yeah, very distant. And I didn't get very attached to people because I always thought they're going to leave or they're going to hurt you. And that's why I identify with Vin so much. And again, so this is a fantasy novel. So you can find stuff that applies to you, and which is why I love her so much. So yeah.
No, I feel that very similarly. Can I? I will watch that.
It's very funny.
I mean, there's so many aspects to Vin, like the trying to make yourself small and trying not to be seen. And I relate to that so much because my mom's second husband, who lived with us for a lot of my childhood, I was a very angry man who would find anything to yell at you for. And so I would walk home as fast as I could from school and then go to my room in hopes that he would, when he got home, not realize I was home. And because you're like, I don't want him to find something to yell at me for. I don't want him. And my mom would even, and I didn't even find this out until I was an adult, during her lunch break would drive home from work and try to clean the house so he couldn't find anything to yell at us for. Because he was like, he would find anything. Because he needed help. Like he genuinely had things, he had anger issues. But when you're living in a house where because he was, a little bit more so the negative things toward my mom, obviously. So there would be times where I'm like trying to do my homework and then like hearing them shouting and hearing banging. And I'm just like, I'm just going to try to put my headphones in and keep doing my calculus homework today. And then so you're trying to make yourself so small. And that's what you see Vin doing in the beginning. And then so when you start to like the feminine aspects, I've mentioned this before, that Vin starts to embrace are often things that deal with like not being seen as in from like a male gaze, but just like being able to let yourself be who you are and like having that represented through how you dress or how you like your hair or things like that. It seems like simple things, but they're really powerful things because it's like you're learning how to be your own person and not be like this shell that you're hiding inside all the time. So again, it just like shows so much of how this is a fantasy novel where people fly around and fling coins at each other, and yet it can be so powerful at the same time. I don't remember ever feeling that connected to a character before I read about Vin and then Kaladin. And I'm like, Sanderson, stop it. Stop it. Person that always writes these amazing characters.
Yeah, he does. Which, by the way, if that's okay for you, I had a quote that is exactly about what you just said, Elle, and it's one that I wanted to say in this live show, and it's just, it's Kelsier thinking. And he says, she always does that, Kelsier thought. Wherever she is, she tries to be as small and unnoticeable as possible. So tense. And it's just like, yes, that is exactly her in the beginning. And
you talked about wearing like really the way you would dress and things like that. I mean, I still dress very modestly, but when I was younger, I would always wear like boys' clothes, really like loose fitting. And it took a long time for me to even buy girls' clothes. And I just, that same, like, you just want to hide everything about yourself. And there's like the added, and it hints at it in Mistborn. I don't think Sanderson goes into it too much, but like the fear of like what poor women end up in, like Vin's mother, for example, having to be a prostitute and things. If I'm not mistaken, right? That's what she was. That's how her father, So there's that fear too. And so then like there's the fear of hiding anything that shows that you're a woman as well. And just so many relatable things. If only Ben was here. You know?
I love how Vin grows and you see her come out of her shell as the book goes on, or the series goes on. That from the beginning where she is so like in her shell and making herself as small as possible to having to stop being that and having to like grow and be herself and like exploring different aspects of herself.
Crash the ball. Yeah, and I think Sanderson always does a good job of not making it a story about how, look, Vin is no longer who she was, and that's good. Vin still is a lot of who she was. She's always going to carry her trauma. And there's always going to be that. And so I do like the way that Vin grows, but it is realistic growth. It is growth based on her circumstance, but also not this, look, I'm no longer who I am. Isn't that great? Because that's not how anybody functions. And so I've always appreciated that.
And you definitely still see her struggle with it, especially there's that scene in The Hero of Ages where she is trapped in that room and she sees her brother and she's like, but you're dead. And it's still just bringing back all of those memories of her trauma and the abuse that he gave her.
And I think that Well of Ascension does a good job too of she's grown so much, but then when she starts to question, she starts to revert back to her patterns. And that's what I think is very true for a lot of other people too, is we all have our patterns that we develop to protect ourselves. And even when we're kind of growing and coming away from that we still kind of go back to that, which not that we need to get into this, but like that's another aspect of something like addiction. It's why it's not just like, I'll just stop now. There's so many behavioral things that play into it. And I appreciate that we see that with Vin as well, that she like that moment too. I thought that same thing, Abby, where she's in the cell and then she starts like thinking about her brother and then thinking about all the like being small. But I also love the moments where it's like, I'm not small anymore. I'm kind of a boss. And then that's right, you are.
That's what I like about the scene where she meets Elend, is she's in this moment of she thinks she's by herself and that she doesn't have to hide, and then all of a sudden Elend is upon her and she gets to just for a minute be her actual true self. And I think that's one of the first times in the series where she's, you know, more naturally her. She's really comfortable with him. She's just quite happy to like, you know, tease him, even though she's this noble that she shouldn't feel comfortable around. And I feel like it's such a good indication of what their relationship is throughout the whole series, and that's something that I really, really enjoy. I've always loved Elend as well, by the way.
I love the scene where they meet, like at the ball, and then meeting in the alcove with him with all his books. I love that scene.
See, I didn't love it until the second time I read it, because the first time I'm like, is he a bad guy? You know, like, is he making me? Is he making me want to like this like cute little book smart, nice noble? Or
I didn't like it either, Elle. I'm so glad to hear someone else say that. I was going to stay quiet. The first read, I liked it. The second read through. The first read through, I was like, really? She's going to have a romance? This like strong girl is going to be like this dumb romance with this like book guy? Like, come on. But then as we meet Elend, Elend made me like him. I had to like Elend by the end. So I liked it the second time.
I also really like that Elend, something I like about their relationship, even though they're like sometimes the driest couple, but I still love though that I think that's just a Sanderson thing, right? Like, not that I'm saying we need all the saucy details. I'm just like, you like have passion for each other. Like, but anyway, I love that he always, even when he doesn't understand her, always loves her anyway. There's that scene where she goes to that one keep with Zane and she does a bunch of bad stuff. And then she kind of crawls back into that hideout. And when he finds her and he doesn't really know what to do, but just kind of letting her know, like, I'm here for you. And, you know, like basically letting her know I care, but if you need to take your time, then just that like, he's not ever trying to tell her how to be necessarily, just letting her know it's like, it's okay for you to feel things. It's okay if you need to do your own thing sometimes, and not your own thing like go murder a bunch of sex people, but you know what I mean, like the more just personality type stuff. So I like that he doesn't always understand her, because I think that's a thing that books can fall into sometimes, is like, no one's ever understood me the way this love interest does. And I almost feel like it's more powerful to be like, we're two different people and I'm not in your head. I don't always understand you, but I love you anyway.
Yeah, Elend doesn't try to change Vin. Elend influences Vin like a good relationship should. You should make each other better, but he doesn't try to change her. And like you said, Elle, like they really are very different people, and Sanderson lets that sit. They're not like, yeah, like you said, there's never this scene where like, oh, we understand each other better than anyone else, because they don't. And like that's just the reality. But they believe in the vision of what they could be together.
Yeah,
and
they're always
I love that bit.
comfortable.
Sorry.
Oh no, please! I've talked way too much.
I was just going to say, I really love that bit where Vin goes and speaks with Sazed and Tindwall, and then she leaves, and then Ellen comes in and talks to Sazed about the same thing. Brilliant.
Yes.
And he's like, I have a feeling you guys are thinking the same thing. And she's like, oh, really?
And it's also a good representation of 17-year-olds, because, you know, they are teenagers trying to be in an adult relationship and dealing with adult problems.
Like a siege of the city they're living in. Like, just general 17-year-old stuff. You know?
Yeah, they're cute. I do think in Well of Ascension, she's so worried about him being killed all the time that she almost becomes like animalistic, like she's a mama bear protecting her cubs kind of thing. Oh, dang it, someone's riding their bike up to my house. We talked about this earlier before the live show.
Fling a coin. But what you said, I think, is that throughout that whole book, you have her being like a mama bear with her cubs, like you just said, and then at the end, she's willing to let him die instead of using the power to heal him, and that's just like so. Oh, I love that.
Well, and that's something I love about their relationship too, is that they're always wanting to do what's best for the world.
Yeah.
And one of my least favorite romantic tropes is, I don't care if everybody else dies as long as it's me and you. And I'm like, that's stupid and you're selfish. I get it. I get that it's like the ultimate sacrifice for you to like have your loved one, you know, but at the same time, like, I get it, right? I'm like, I don't like a lot of people in the world. I don't even know them, but I'm just like, people, ugh. But I still would want like the best for mankind over one human being. I don't know. But the Elend, something that Hillary said made me think too, like, and that whole, the way that they are always like kind of questioning each other and stuff, but just that she's, I feel like often, so she wants to take the easy way out. She just wants to go murder people. Like, Elend, just let me go assassinate people. It would be such an easier solution. He's like, no, I have my ideals, my morals. And she's begrudgingly like, maybe that is what's best. But then he also appreciates how like ruthless and powerful she can be. And I don't know, I like that they, again, like they're not trying to be each other, but they're, yes.
They complement each other with their differences.
Yes.
They do.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And another thing I like about Vin and Elend, and I hope I don't sound like a broken record, but I do feel like it subverts at the time what was going on with our female characters, which is that Vin is protective of Elend. Vin is the one who has to constantly be protective of him, and it is not shown as Elend being weak. It is shown that they have different strengths. And it is one thing I've loved, because Abby, like you said, there is this worry when Elend becomes a Mistborn that will change, and that all of a sudden Elend will get to be the big fighter as well. And it's amazing how it doesn't. Elend still feels very Elend, even as a Mistborn, the way that he handles things in Heroes of Ages. I can't think of a specific situation, but like it is still very different from the way that Vin would handle being a Mistborn. And I appreciate that dynamic. I think it's important to read about male and females having different personalities that are all acceptable, if that makes sense. I just like that.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I've seen some people feel like all of the strength of Vin is robbed when Elend gets to be a Mistborn. And I'm like, I understand if somebody feels that way, that's perfectly fine to feel that way. I just disagree because Vin is still so much more skilled at it. She's like quicker. She's more clever with how to use different things around her, and she's constantly looking around, and she analyzes her surroundings. And so I think she uses it differently, which in a way is kind of like a reflection of their strengths too. She's always been this like small Mistborn. I mean, even fighting other Mistborns, she always knew, and Kelsier always told her, if you're ever going to do like a pushing match, you're going to lose because you're smaller. So she's had to find ways, but I feel like that's kind of just who she is. She's always had to find ways to not have to succumb to like the strength of others around her. So I don't know. I never felt like Elend becoming a Mistborn was somehow like a slap in the face.
He's like Bambi being a Mistborn.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. Like he's not. It's not where his skill set is, and he knows it, and she knows it as well. Like they know that he is much more political and morally driven.
I mean, even someone like I think Elend as a Mistborn is more like how Sazed is with his powers, because Sazed is the sweetheart who doesn't want to have to ever hurt anything. And that scene in the Well of Ascension where he's even during the battle like, maybe I should reserve a little more, and he's turning into the Hulk basically, and dude does work. And then he still is, you don't even see him as this rage monster. You still just see him as like, oh, Sazed trying to save the day.
I think it just shows how much their relationship grows though by the time they get to the Hero of Ages, and they're like, well, we have to make this plan, but we can't talk about this plan, so I'll just do what I have to do, you do what you have to do, and if I tell you to do something, just do it, and you have to trust that there's a reason. And they're both totally fine with that, and it's not even a question. It's just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And there was never the drama of what happened at the end of the Well of Ascension. If in some books you would have had that, then in the Hero of Ages they would fight because why didn't you try to save me, or now I'm a Mistborn, I didn't want to be. And here you just had two adults, and even though they're only 17, they still just like talked through their stuff, and it was fine.
The world's ending because of you.
Yeah.
What did you do?
I think that something that I talked to you, Sophia, about this before. I always felt like Elend was very much more looking at the war and the sieges and everything that was going on, and she was very much focused on the world with ruin and preservation and all that stuff. Which is why, again, what Abby you were saying, with they each have their strengths and they each have their own like area of focus, kind of. And I loved seeing that because both things were very important. You couldn't just not deal with the one thing or the other, and they both shined in their stuff where they are strong at. Sorry.
Yeah,
I do want to say
limitations too.
Really quick, I know we keep joking about like them being 17, but if I'm not mistaken, she is 16 and turns 17 in book 1, and he's like 21, I think.
Yeah,
and
I believe so, yeah.
A year passes, which means she's like 18 in book 2, and then eventually I think probably becomes 19, and then I think another yearish passes. So by the end, she's like early 20s. But I've seen some people think that age difference of her being 17 and him being 21 is weird. And I mean, if it were a high schooler and a 21-year-old, maybe, but like it's a fantasy world. And I don't know, I don't really see it that way. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I've never really thought about it. I mean, it's not as though anything really happens when she's 17 between them, really.
It's a good, there's like one time that you're like, oh, they just did stuff, but otherwise they like, you might as well. They're just.
I think so. Their relationship feels very innocent in the beginning. Like when she's going to these balls and they are talking, it is such an innocent relationship, but also contrasting that Vin is not an innocent girl, and not in a bad way, but she has had to deal with lots of things. So I don't think that there is, I think when we normally think of maybe a 21 and a 17-year-old, we worry about taking advantage or not being adult enough to make decisions. And I don't feel like that dynamic ever feels there between Vin and Elend. So, you know.
Especially because she tortures herself during the second book about whether or not she wants to be with him, deserves to be with him, that she's the right person for him, and all that kind of stuff. So
I feel like we could have a whole video about Elend. He doesn't get enough love, you know? He's a good
Let's do
character.
every Sanderson character. We'll do this panel for every Sanderson character.
There's always a Sanderson character who doesn't get enough love, you know? It always feels.
An Alrianne.
This was Ben's comment. Elend having his terrible relationship with a parent, but Vin and Elend don't discuss it, I think shows how sometimes people can have experiences in common and focus on the differences instead. Yeah, for sure. Because they both had terrible parents, if you think about it.
His dad's the worst.
I
But
mean,
the best part is when she cuts him
And
in
her
half.
dad isn't very good either.
That moment where she just like sweeps down from the sky, and you're like,
Suck the best. The other day I was walking and I thought of that scene. I was like, yes, Vin. I don't know why.
there's so many good moments. That's a great one where she's just like, you know what? I am gonna just cut your head off. Basically, like there's the scene where Ellen cuts Sniveling Man's head off, which is the best. That scene is great. Not advocating for that in real life, but in this fictional setting, it's so satisfying. How does she kill Straff? I know she uses a giant Kola sword. Does she just like cut him in half?
Yeah, she jumps from something and
down
it's
the
like,
middle. She cuts the horse in half too. So
oh,
sad.
poor horsey.
I know, poor horse.
I particularly love where she just like completely flattens his emotions and is like, yeah, this is what I can do to you.
Yeah, that
You
is
will
such
feel
a good
nothing.
scene.
And that's okay, sorry, but I guess this is about Vin, so it's fine. The whole like where he's talking to his dad, and then Straff is just like meh about Vin, like thinking like she's not that strong, and she's purposefully like pretending like she's intimidated by him. It's like such a cool way to show how she's using what she used to do to hide, and like once again using it, and now being like, but look what I can do, and you're like, yes. And then when he feels that fear, but then he's such a because he has that girl that looks like Vin, and you're like, I can't wait for you to die. I hate you so much. He's a great villain because I really hated him. Yeah, exactly. You know, Anne can wear a ball gown. You know, like get the girl
can do both.
Oh, yeah, the animals of the Cosmere. You know, the
animals of any fantasy world.
We should do a Tensoon panel at some point because Tensoon is the best.
He is.
So.
Or
I may
as,
retro guess back.
as Alan keeps wanting to call him, like I wonder now that he's read more of the series if he'll start being able to call him Tensoon.
Yeah, because we did a live show on Well of Ascension, and Alan was like, I will always call him or sir. And I was like, but no, it's Tensoon.
I knew I loved Alan. I always call him Osir too because I like that name better. I hate just the way Tensoon looks on a page. I don't like, even though he's one of my favorite characters. And so I'm always an Osir fan too. I'm so glad I'm not the only one.
How do you all say Adolin? Do you say Adeline or
I say
Adolin?
Adolin.
Adolin. Yeah. Adolin.
I say
Adolin.
Adeline.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's always an Adeline in.
If you watch any of my Cosmere videos, 90% of the comments on them are like, you pronounce everything wrong. And it's seriously
Priorities.
I don't listen to the book, so that's my problem.
Did you guys want to say something else about Vin and Elend as a couple, their relationship, the ending?
Oh my gosh. I love though. So that ending is so bittersweet because, you know, they finally get to rest and they never got to have like a happy, it's weird. The happiest moment is the end of the final empire. That's the happiest moment for that. As far as like the most peaceful, that's different. The most like peaceful, they have a moment to breathe. They can just enjoy each other, but they can't because immediately there's all these other threats. Mm-hmm. So they finally get to have a break and it's in death, which is tragic, but also they never get to see the world that they saved. Like the like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get emotional talking about it, but like the flower, the picture of the flower, and she like never got to actually see that, because like he puts them in the field of flowers. It's so emotional, but like they never get to see it, the world that they saved, you know. That makes me
But
sad.
is there another ending? Because I remember when I read it, I was so upset about it because it's so sad that they die. Like so many people die. But when I was done, I thought, but it couldn't have ended another way.
Right.
If Adeline and Vin survived, it feels like
Because
it
I was
just doesn't.
thinking, because I got this comment on a video that I did saying that they were discussing they did a buddy read of Hero of Ages, and they were discussing it with their friend, and they had differences in their book, which I did a whole video on how the UK and US have differences within their books. And it wasn't to do, like, the ending was the same. They didn't go into all of the details. I think it must have just been like a paragraph where there was a difference. But when I started looking into it, because I couldn't find that much information on it, and I think Sanderson did say that he wrote a different ending for the Hero of Ages, and then it wasn't published.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that. I was saying just for me, like, I don't think it could have ended another way. Like, Vin and Elend surviving doesn't feel like it gives the weight to the story that it needed. And so it's this horrible thing where everything you say, Elle, is true, and it's like depressing every time you read it, like that they never got their moment. But at the same time, like,
the world would have still
have
depended on them. I don't think they would have ever had the chance to rest, because it's not like, oh, everything's perfect now that we, like, now that Sazed is the one who's our god, basically. It's not like, hey, Sazed, can you just make everything great? Like, the people are still people. There's still going to be corruption. There's still going to be murder. There's still a world to build up from. I mean, it was basically the apocalypse, right? So they would never have been able to rest. So that's why I think it's bittersweet, because these two finally get to, like, they did it, and now it's somebody else's turn. But
they do get a moment in the Secret History. So if anyone wants to read that,
no.
I love that we have Secret History.
Don't. I don't want.
I think it's still very bittersweet. I actually think the moment for me in Secret History makes it even more bittersweet.
Oh, I love it.
You don't think so?
I hated it. I hated the scene in there.
Oh, you did? I liked it.
It felt like a little reunion, kind of like yay moment, and I'm like, no, I liked it better when I found it really.
I guess because I interpreted the afterlife of the Cosmere as an amorphous thing, so I don't actually believe they're up somewhere in heaven having a party. So I think that's why it still say bittersweet to me, because I thought it was like, well, they're not really together. I don't know. We don't really know about the afterlife and the Cosmere unless you're a cognitive shadow. So I can't really definitively say that.
I mean, I feel like Rhythm of War also, not going to give spoilers, but Rhythm of War also is like, so how much can there be some, I wonder if like books and books and books down the line, we're going to get this amazing, like all of the shards, all like the evil shards with all like every hero we've ever had coming together in some way. I don't know that that'll actually happen, but if Vin and Elend,
not. Is that terrible? I hope some people stay dead.
Yeah,
you know, I'm never for the scene where everyone comes. I mean, I'm the grumpy person who at the end of Avengers Endgame or whatever, when everyone's coming together, I'm like, this is cheesy.
Thank you.
Yes,
I hated that as well.
You're dead. I want to commit to a death. Like, I don't like when everyone dies, but like if you've done the death, you're committed to it. No one can come once you're dead, you're dead.
I think we will find out more about the spiritual realm though, as the Cosmere books progress, because it's been mentioned so many times, and Sanderson doesn't do that for no reason, like ever. Everything always has a meaning, so I think we'll probably end up there eventually.
I really like Joanna's comments, which, their deaths felt like it meant something beyond just having characters we love die. Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, Sanderson's pretty good about being intentional about his deaths. And I don't know if anyone listens to Writing Excuses. I haven't listened to a ton, but some of his earlier episodes, it's Sanderson and other writers talk about writing tips or whatever. And one thing they did say is, like, don't ever kill a character just to kill a character or get an emotional response from your reader. You need to have character deaths mean something. And I do feel like he's very good at that. Like, Vin and Elend's death did mean something other than just trying to make us sad.
Yeah.
And I think, I know not everyone here has read Era 2, correct?
Correct.
But the way, this isn't, I don't think a spoiler, because obviously it takes like 300 years later. It is interesting to see how like Vin and Elend are remembered. It's not like a huge focus because obviously it's years and years later, but it is interesting to see how the events of the first era. That's one of my favorite things about second era. Even if I don't love it as much, I do like seeing how the world would remember those events and those people. And I think that little things like he'll have like a street named after, you know, a character or something, and you're like, I like that detail a lot. And that's the kind of whenever you have an addition to a series, some kind of, you know, side thing going on, that's how I like to see the other books or characters mentioned. I don't like when like the villain comes back or like, you know, it doesn't like you guys are all saying, it doesn't carry the same weight then.
I do. I like the way, I guess, because it is hundreds of years in the future for Era 2, that you do get these sort of not like mentions of these things as history, because it becomes their sort of history and part of what the people in Era 2 have been brought up on, knowing that these characters existed, but they're not actually there. So
yeah, my favorite of those, and this is, I don't feel like this spoils anything, but is how they view Vin killing what's her name in the first one, and in the Era 2, they're like, oh, Vin killed Ellen's fiance to assert her dominance, and you're like, that's not what happened. That's not what this was in the first book. And I love that just very subtle commentary on how we remember history, and it is how it is written. And I that was one of my favorite parts. I mean, I'm not a huge Era 2 fan, most people know, but I loved that part in particular, like where we get to see how people remember even our beloved characters like Sazed, where I get very frustrated when people blame him for things, and I'm like, no, you don't know Sazed like I know Sazed. And so it's just, that's a very interesting dynamic. Yeah.
It would be very fascinating for somebody to read them in reverse on purpose to see what their expectations are for how the characters. I almost wish I could do that, but obviously I know the characters. But it would be really interesting for a first-time person who's willing to like essentially be spoiled for the events to have them read Era 2 and then tell you what they think of the characters, what they think happened, what they think they're going to get, and then how it differs when they actually read it. Somebody should do that. I mean,
somebody has somewhere, right? I'll Google it. I bet someone somewhere has done it.
We'll bring him on to the next panel.
Mistake, someone must have done that.
That's true. Yeah. But then we didn't put their notes beforehand. I need to find somebody to treat as a guinea pig and be like, I have this experiment. Will you please do this for me?
I need you already read them?
I need you to read 7 books. Yeah, Sean already read First Era.
Melvin hasn't, so maybe I could try.
They're saying someone in Michael's Discord is doing it.
Are they actually going to like document how they feel about the characters and stuff?
Oh, there we go.
Or it's just that they're reading Era 2 first, just like for the heck of it.
We got to get in on that. We got to tell them to take notes.
Yeah. Which, by the way, we are starting Era 2 this month for Cosmere Unbounded. So if you wanted to join us, it is the time. So, which we were talking about just that now. I feel like this is a very good segue to one of the few points that we have left. It was Vin as the heir of the survivor, and how people kind of see her as like a god-like figure, even when she's still alive. And they're like, but you're the heir of the survivor. And she's like, no, but Kelsier wasn't really a god, guys. And how she sees herself with the religion that's starting to form. And we're talking about history later in Era 2, how how she sees herself and Kelsier and everything that happened, and how people see her and kind of like they deify her. They make her a god. So if you have comments on that, I don't know.
On another other thing, my food has arrived, so I'm gonna have to disappear because we've ordered food and it's here. So
all right.
But thank you for.
How dare you, Abby?
Yeah.
Enjoy. Oh, and there's a very loud car outside as well.
Thank you so much, Abby, for being here.
Okay, bye.
See you later.
I know it's not everybody's favorite, but another series that I think does this pretty well, and I actually really like this whole idea of this character who knows they're just a person, even if they do have powers, being seen as this religious figure, is, of all things, Shadow and Bone. The way they start to see her as like a saint, or she's like their savior and stuff like that. And I always really like that examination of what that does to the person, because in a bizarre way, the only thing I feel like most human beings can relate to that is like celebrity status of some kind. As like, as soon as you start getting followers and people care about your opinion and they tell you like you have a platform and stuff, not that that's not a thing, you know, but just that that's the only thing that I feel like we can really relate to in that way, because most of us, people aren't looking at us being like, I think you're gonna save us from evil. But I really like seeing how she is so used to being in the shadows, of seeing herself as like this weaker person and hiding, and then all of a sudden people are almost like worshiping her, and the way that affects her mind and the way that it makes her almost want to hide even more, because she definitely hates. There's even that moment, who's the guard's name that kind of believes in the religion a little bit, and
Demu.
well,
Demu, is it him?
Yeah, so the way that she almost like doesn't want to talk to him anymore, I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, and Grace is saying how fast it happened, and it was really fast. Like in the next book, people were ready, and even Demu, she tells him like, "But you were there, you know, Kelsier, you know he wasn't God."
And I actually, that is one thing I also liked about Era too. I liked a lot more of the background stuff when we see different people worshiping religions based on people we knew were not gods. And that we know shard holders, which are the gods kind of this world. It just makes a very interesting dynamic where the reader knows more in a non-frustrating way than the characters. And I've only read Gardens of the Moon, but Erickson kind of plays with that too. Like we see the deities, but then we see people's perception of the deities. And I always think that is a very interesting dynamic to have as a reader. Like it's something I'm really excited to explore more in the Cosmere. It's explored a little bit, in Stormlight with Dalinar. Don't want to.
I was gonna say,
and in Warbreaker.
That's like his whole character arc. Is he's like, I'm a god who doesn't believe in being a god.
He's a god who doesn't believe he's a god, doesn't believe in his own deity, and so I think those themes are just very interesting to me, and maybe that's why I love Warbreaker so much. But the idea of people worshiping you as an idea, separate from who you are, is just very interesting.
What do you think that says? Because I kind of said it happens sort of in our own world and celebrity status, or it can happen even with religious figures like pastors of churches and things, that you start to hold people to a higher standard. It's like this search for finding meaning in more than just your own life. Like you have to believe in something, and Vin is right there, and like she saved them from the Lord Ruler, so they can't believe just a human saved them. They have to believe she has to be more than that. I don't know, what do you think that says about where do you think like that metaphor is, or what that says about people, or what Sanderson's maybe trying to say with that, or if anything, if it's just a pattern he's noticed in people?
It's interesting because Sanderson himself is very religious. And I do find it very interesting how he is able to put so much religious overtone in his novels without necessarily telling you how he feels about things. Because I feel like you could read into that in very different ways. Like maybe you could read into it that it gives people hope and that religion is important, or you could read it into the opposite way where it's like people are making deities out of people who aren't. Like you could read it in very different ways. I don't know if there is an answer. I don't know if he is trying to say something. Like, it's just interesting. I don't know.
Which you have that with Sazed as well, when he starts going through all the religions. And that's something that with Sanderson being so his religion, sometimes when you talk to people from the religion that he's from, people say, yeah, every religion has a little bit of truth, but we believe that ours has all of it. I'm not saying that that's what Brandon Sanderson thinks, but I grew up in that religion, and I've departed from it since, so that's kind of like what we were always taught to say. And I love that actually came in Sazed. When I read that, I was like, whoa, this is like so like that. And so he did bring that in there. And I know some people who have said, oh, he's way too religious in his book, Sanderson. Like he's trying to preach that there's one way to think. And I never felt that way, because you have Yasna and all those people.
So I'm not Mormon, but I grew up in a very Mormon community. So I'm also a little bit familiar with that, a lot of what they believe. And I feel a little bad, I just want to say, I feel like media they find like the kind of outliers, and then they're like, this is what they're like. And I'm like, they're really nice people. But anyway, so I think that what he does so often is he creates a religion of that world, not necessarily a religion that he's like trying to preach to you and tell you this is how it is. And even the politics too, I don't feel like he's ever telling you like, these are my political beliefs. He has characters that believe different things politically. even how like Ellen sees something versus how, you know, someone in another series like Dalinar would see something, and their solutions to things are dependent on their circumstances or their background or what they've read before. I mean, sometimes Ellen can be a little too idealistic, and sometimes he's like, I have to believe in, it's almost like a, what is it called? People that like believe in the like Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and like those, they're like, what is that called again? Where you believe in these, like the truth of these documents more than anything, and you like don't really, I'm forgetting what it's called. But anyway,
I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the name either.
Ellen's almost like sort of like that, where he believes in like these values, and then he holds to him so true, which you see in that scene where they're like, can I change my vote? And you're like, say no, you're the queen, say no. And I love that part. But anyway, I know we're talking about like the religious aspects of the book too, but I never felt like he was trying to preach to, I don't know if that's what it is. I don't know if that's what I'm thinking of, but maybe they're just like constitutionalists. I don't know what it's
Constitutionalists. Isn't that what it is?
I
That
don't know.
sounds right to
I'm
me.
sorry. My husband would be ashamed of me. He knows this stuff better than me. But I never feel like he's trying to tell you what to think. And it's, I mean, in a way, you could almost, anybody that's been in any kind of a religious community could almost say that what Sanderson is doing is like bad morally, because he's showing like not his like what he believes in necessarily in his books. He's showing you a different God in a different world, and you know what I mean, like it's not exactly a different, he's kind of going into there being a cognitive realm and a spiritual realm, and it's not necessarily based in like his faith per se. So yeah, I never really felt like it was him telling you how to feel.
Yeah, and I think he does. I mean, I guess full disclosure, I belong to the same religion as Sanderson. So I am a religious person.
You did.
That is just like,
You do or you did?
I do. I currently am. Yes, I currently am. Yes. So, and it is interesting because I appreciate you, Elle. People do have a lot of misconceptions about what that means. Because there are some very bad examples of people in our religion and in all religions. There's people who make very mad names. And I would be the first to admit that Christianity has been used as a hammer in the past for people, and it is not great. So, but what's interesting is I do appreciate that I don't ever feel like, because when I'm reading it, I'm always appreciative of how exploratory he is about religious and political ideals. And particularly something I complain about a lot in books is like when they tell me how to think. And I do feel like he never tells you when a character is right or wrong. And I think that is why a lot of people have very different ideas of like characters like Moash or people who, I know a lot of people hate Moash, but I did a big deep dive on the people who support him. And it was very interesting to see how he has been written in a way that you can support that. And so with Vin being deified like this and Sazed technically being a deity, I think those are some very interesting things to explore. And as a religious person myself, I feel like I really connect with Sanderson, that through his writing, he is probably exploring how he feels about religion. You know, as religious people, some people do. Me as a religious person don't feel like I have all the answers. I don't feel like I know everything. And so finding a way to explore that I think is very interesting in his works and is something I really love about them.
And something I love too is that I feel like most, I'm going to say organized religion. I feel like people who consider themselves, like, let's say in this instance, Christian, which is a more broad, obviously there's so many different aspects of Christianity, but that's part of what's so interesting is that you'll have people who consider themselves Christian, but you get two Christians in the same room and they don't feel the same about everything. So even within the same, organized religion or the same label, you're not going to find people agree on everything. And so what I like about his books also is that I feel like Sazed, it's so fascinating to see somebody who's arguably the most faithful not align exactly, like he just is documenting the history of so many of these different faiths. And he's the one that I feel like his exploration of religion obviously is rooted in the most knowledge of it. But also, if you're somebody who has come from a religious background or you still believe in something of that sort, maybe you believe in parts of what you used to believe in, as far as like, we'll say Christian again, like you believe in aspects of it, but then you kind of wonder like, I don't know that I agree with this. I don't know if I agree with a lot of the majority of what they're saying. And then I think it's just great that he has that in his books as well. You have not good guy, bad guy. The bad guy is the one who's like believes in all these bad things, and then the good person's like the good religious one or something. It's like Vin murders people, and like she's our hero. And you mentioned Moash. A lot of people say Moash would be, if Kelsier was in that world, he would be Moash. Like a lot of people say that's kind of, I'm sorry for anybody that doesn't know who Moash is, but it is interesting how, again, the different worlds, the different circumstances, the different political realm, it changes how you see a person. They can be a hero in one area and then a villain in another. I feel like I just said a lot of nonsense, but I just think he does really well.
You're totally right. And again, I don't want to do any spoilers, but Kelsier is a great example of a character that in different situations is going to be a hero or a villain, and is someone that people love, but is not necessarily a very good person. And I do love that Sanderson, because of world hopping, provides us context for how different situations provide different villains and heroes. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is.
As someone who's not remotely religious in any way whatsoever, I don't feel like Sanderson pushes any kind of religious agenda in any of his books, but I do find what he does with religions in his books really, really interesting. And they're all so completely different, and their approaches to things are really different. And he can find humor in it as well. Like with, I know we're not talking about Stormlight, but with Syl, she's like, you should worship me, I am a god. And like, he makes fun of it, he makes it really interesting. So I think it's a really interesting part of the world that he builds.
I think it also, in a kind of roundabout way, helps us build empathy for those that don't see eye to eye on everything. And I mean, there are some instances of things that I think are pretty inexcusable, that I won't say here because they're like really horrendous things, right? But for the most part, I would say that you have characters who, like Sazed and Vin and Kelsier, the fact that they all cared so deeply for one another and are so different in their personalities, in their beliefs, and their ideals, I think helps us kind of talking about the metaphor of fantasy. You can look at like our own world and you can apply it to religion or politics or other areas also, and just understand, like, reach across the table and recognize, like, I think it's so cool that we have in this one panel, like, somebody who considers himself of the same faith as him, somebody who used to be of that faith, someone who's not religious. And then I'm kind of like, I consider myself a person of faith and most aligned, I guess, with Christianity, but also there are things I don't. And I think it's so cool how, like, all of us can come together and think like well of each other, think like these are great people. And I think it's really cool that his books showcase that without having like, well, this is the purest of them, this character here, so we should follow them because they're the best.
Yeah, that is absolutely true.
I agree.
Yeah, I love that.
One question about the ending. I have a friend who, she personally didn't love that. She felt like, in a way, the book was saying that Sazed's religion was the correct one, as far as like, because they kind of more so predicted the like hero of ages aspects and stuff. So they felt like it was almost saying that his was right all along. And I don't know that I 100% agree, because I think that his faith was like, it got that accurate as far as like kind of knowing where more about the hero of ages. But there was kind of like we were saying before, there was like truth in all of these different faiths. So it required like putting together all of this it wasn't like his faith was the combination of all these others. But I'm curious your thoughts on that, if any of you felt that way.
I didn't at all. I felt like he needed pieces of all of them, and each of them gave him answers to different questions that needed to be answered. And it just so happened that his religion was the final piece of that puzzle, but it didn't form the greater picture. It was just that one piece that slid everything into place and put everything in focus. And now you can see that it needed to be him, because he had all of those pieces to put together to fit Gabriel.
Fix
so
the
I
world.
didn't feel that way
I
at all.
see him as like a mechanic, where he knows how to, like, he gets the car to drive, but he needed someone to put on the wheels. He needed someone to do the lights. He needed someone to do the engine, and he needed all those people to come together. And in this case, religions. And he was the one who like then knew how to place it because other people had studied it and had all those visions, and he put it together. Yeah.
Yeah, when you first asked the question, I actually thought you were talking about something different. I thought you were talking about Era 2, and is it weird that people who worship harmony are correct? And but I disagree with that too. People have had this problem with Jasna. They're very worried about Jasna being an atheist in a world that has gods. But I feel the opposite. I feel like, well, doesn't Sazed's ascension prove that he was a person? And our shard bearers, can they really be considered deities? And I will not say obviously, but with events that happen in Stormlight with shards also calls into question, I think, the deity nature of shard bearers. And so I feel that because there is that question there, that we can't just look at be like, oh, worshiping harmony is the correct religion. Like, I don't necessarily think that is a one-to-one correlation. Just the same way you guys said about him having the final piece. I don't think it meant that like his religion was correct.
I like that you brought that. I say Yasna. I know that's another.
I'm wrong. I'm just wrong. I'm sorry.
But I think that also shows that he's not aiming to preach, because he has a character who, she's one of the most intelligent characters in the Cosmere. She has these deep conversations with people where she points out like, well, but here's why that doesn't make any sense though. She'll have these conversations with the religious people of their world. And I just disagree. I've seen people say before, and Hillary, maybe you're like, I don't know, that you get frustrated at this, because some people who will negatively rate his books will be like, he put too much of his Mormon beliefs and like the whole writing and metal thing. It's like plates. And I'm always like,
wow, I never made that connection.
I made that connection a month ago.
Ever made that connection.
I was going to
think
ask
that
you.
is a weird coincidence. It's funny because Jasna's my favorite character in the Cosmere. Number one, I identify the most with her, which I find very strange. And maybe it's because it's a religious person writing an atheist. That's why maybe because it's not an atheist writing an atheist. But I think if there was going to be any connection to Mormonism, it's mostly found in that all of his gods are people. Because Mormonism does believe that, like, we don't believe in the Trinity. So we believe that God is a physical person. So I think of anything, that's the religious element that I see constantly through his works that interests me. But other than that, I feel like, yes, Mormons can burn metals. Did you guys not know this secret? We're all
He is a Mistborn.
Mistborns. I've been trying to keep it secret, but the cat's out of the bag.
I'm a Mystic because I grew up around Mormons, but I'm not a Mormon. So.
We can give you guys some of our powers, just come hang out.
I kept
That's
mine.
the only thing I really see.
Your temples are like the Well of Ascension.
You didn't know that? Yeah, we talked to preservation.
I don't know why people, we're letting out all the secrets right now. Why do you think a lot of people can't go to the temples? Because they don't want to get one of those beads and become Mistborn.
No, I think a lot of his religious stuff isn't actually very influenced by, I think it's influenced by a lot of different religions. I've been someone who's always been very interested in religion in general. So I've looked into and attended and gone to a lot of different religions. That's just something I'm very interested in, seeing people's viewpoints. And I think that, to me, his writing tends to borrow a lot, I think, from a lot of religions.
Well, I will say it's inevitable that something you've experienced or believe in is potentially going to seep into you cannot write something. It's from your own brain, right? So sure, there might be some influences, but at the end of it, I feel like, to just put it bluntly and simply, he's writing a fantasy story, and he's writing a lot of fantasy stories. That's all. I don't think this is like some giant metaphor to try to convert everybody.
It's not working if it is.
Yeah. How many people have converted now to his faith after reading his books?
Probably. Did you know that I didn't know he was Mormon? I mean, I knew he taught at BYU, so then I made the connection. But I never even knew, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, you wouldn't know even if you...
I thought that's what
I started reading his books at BYU. It's the only reason I started reading, because I had read Wheel of Time. And people were like, oh, that guy teaches here. And I'm like, oh, really? And that's why I picked up his books. And so I always knew the connection. But reading his books, I personally don't think so, but I might be biased. So
I think it's really interesting what you were saying before, Hillary, about the all the gods are people, because I think, we don't know if Adonalsium, I know this is not Mistborn specific, but it's also not spoilers. We don't know if Adonalsium was a person or some other kind of being, and we don't know if Adonalsium was considered a god, whatever they were. But there is this perception that the shards of Adonalsium are gods. So I think that whole it's just an interesting conversation around that as well, I think.
Completely.
And once I feel like we got to reconvene in like 30 years when all the Stormire comes out and everything's out, and we're
More
like
like 40 years.
we're all like white haired and gray haired, and we got to come back and be like, here's. It would be really funny to like react.
We can play clips,
Yeah.
All right, I'll write it in my planner.
All right, see you guys in 40 years.
40 years to this day, same time.
Let's hope nobody's dead.
Elle.
That's the saddest thing ever. Is I saw this like really sweet review of, I feel like it was Stormlight, and they were like, I read this with my grandson and I really loved it. It was so great. I'm a little sad that I probably won't live to see the end of this series. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, obviously any of us could walk outside and get like struck by lightning and die or something, right? But when you're older and you know that it's like, oh man, at what point do you stop reading series, like new series, because you're like, I don't know. And then what if you're like, I'm 80, I should probably cut it because I'm not going to be able, and then you live for another 20 years, you're like, I gotta read the rest of this series, maybe I'll live for another 20 more.
This is taking a very dark turn.
I'm sorry.
That was one of my first conversations with Sophia.
Story about the horse that goes over the rainbow was
That's okay. Yes. Have you heard about my like favorite childhood book? So there's this book series. It had really beautiful illustrations, and my favorite one as a small child, and my mom was like, why do you like this? It was about this little baby horse whose mom was always like, don't go too close to the waterfall, you'll slip. And then it was curious, and it like wanted to go near the waterfall, and it did slip, and it fell, and it was at the bottom, and it's like looking up at its mom and like the herd of horses. And then a unicorn, I believe, comes and like talks to it. And they're like, you won't get to be with your family now, but you can come with me and it'll be okay. And I loved that book. And looking at it's like, that baby horse died. It died and the unicorn took it to heaven. That's what happened. But I loved it. My mom's like, this is the most depressing kids book I've ever read. Why do you like this? My mom hates that stuff. I don't know why I like it so much, but yes. My mom also, when I was really small, bought a book called How to Deal with a Difficult Child, because when I was a baby, like I didn't like being swaddled. I didn't like having people do things for me, which didn't make any sense because I was a baby and I couldn't do things for myself. And she just didn't know what to do with me. So I guess I just always,
Yep.
was it? It became a unicorn.
There we go.
Are we going to crowdsource and get Ben better internet in 40 years, though?
Yeah.
So he can be a part of the conversation.
You won't be with your parents. You're at your parents' house, you said, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
I was, Dustin. That has to be where like the root of my love of that kind of stuff came from. I don't know. But yeah, we'll have to like, maybe we'll come together in person in 40 years.
Oh, there'll be another pandemic.
wild idea.
That targets only Mistborn lovers. And then we can't see each other. Oh, man. So is there anything else you guys wanted to add about Vin being the hero, not being the hero, Vin, Elend, trust, anything about Vin that you still want to say? Also comments if you still have questions or comments. We can still talk a little bit about Vin if there's some teleport to each other. Yeah, that would be nice.
That would be nice.
She's a hero, even if she's not the hero. And I think she is the hero of the story, even if she's not the hero of Ages.
And I think that's the point. The point. If we're taking it too seriously sort of way, which I often like to do with books, she didn't need a prophecy to be a hero, ultimately. The prophecy wasn't talking about her, but she was the hero, period. And Sazed was a hero in a different way. But yeah, so maybe we don't need to put so much stock in what somebody says or what something's supposed to be, and just, step up and be the person we can be.
Absolutely.
Do what you can.
Mm-hmm.
And Vin just did it all. Or a lot of it.
Most of it.
Yeah. And
Well,
Larry says that if we see each other in 40 years, we'll still be waiting for Winds of Winter.
Awesome areas.
You want to add
And
Doors of Stones to that list? Yes, Doors of Stone.
So that is one of my biggest fears. I talked to Sophia about this the first time we ever chatted. So she didn't even know how dark I can be also. And I told her, what if I die before Stormlight is over and I never know what happens to my boy Kaladin? I will be so sad.
Dude, we don't need to go into Stormlight stuff, but I have feelings, and I'm like, I've said before, people sometimes compare like Mistborn to Stormlight, and I'm like, I mean, I think Stormlight in a lot of ways is better because of it's further in Sanderson's career, but Mistborn currently for me still sits a little higher because he stuck the landing, and I don't know what's gonna happen with the end of the first arc, and I'm like, I don't think he will, but he could mess it up for me personally, so.
But I want that ending. That's thing, that we're all scared about that happens in Stormlight 5. I want that so much. I want to cry my eyes out that I will be like Puffy for 5 days. I
don't even know if I would, depending on what he did, I could cry, I could be emotional, or I could be really upset. I could be really mad at him. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm like 99% sure that thing is going to happen.
No.
I hope so.
No.
So here's a question from Steve for us. When they adapt Mistborn to a movie TV series, who would play Vin?
Elle.
Yes. That is your answer.
Our Elle is right here among us.
I don't know. I've seen some fan castings, but I think it's got to be one of those situations where they find somebody you've never seen really before. But I want it to be a video game or animated. That's what I want. And in that case,
video game.
Be the best video game.
I actually think of all of Sanderson's works, Mistborn would be best adapted into a movie of all of his works. I think Stormlight. Well, I just what I mean is like it's the only one that I think would do well in a movie adaptation. Not that it's the best.
I think Warbreaker could be a fun movie.
Warbreaker, I worry about because there is just a lot of politics, and movies that have like superhero kind of or magic, they never want to make quiet. They always have to be these loud, bombastic movies, and Warbreaker is not a loud, bombastic book. I'm very protective of Warbreaker. It's my favorite Sanderson, so it scares me what they may corrupt in that book. But the reason I say Mistborn is, as a trilogy, I feel like especially the first book could very easily be in an 1.5 to 2 hour movie. Like I think because so much of it is describing visual things. Whereas I think Stormlight, it has to be a TV show. How could you make a Stormlight movie?
That would be garbage. I wouldn't even want it.
It would be garbage. Yeah, it couldn't do it. And so, that's why I just think like of anyone that's going to be a movie, I think it could be Mistborn. Plus Mistborn, I think, has a lot of cross-generational appeal. It definitely is his book that skews the most YA. And so of anything to get him out there, I think Mistborn could be the thing that does it.
I feel like Elantris could be a movie as well. I feel like there's enough that's not like there's not so much going on in Elantris that it would need to be kind of.
I think the special effects in Elantris, I mean, I think you could get some really fantastic makeup artists to do the what's the illness called again? The
Sheod.
Yeah. I think they could make that look pretty good. And it is also a lot of politicking, but not so kind of sort of. It's not exactly. But
they have enough visuals with the zombie-esque nature that I think they could play that up without totally like ruining the novel.
Right.
And Emperor's Soul. I think that would be a really good film.
I still need to read that one.
Emperor's Soul. But again, it's her in a room. Are they going to allow a movie to be about a girl in a room? I just love Emperor's Soul. I always am worried they're going to ruin stuff. Everyone ruins everything. And
that would be my fear. Video game. Video games are my favorite form of entertainment as far as like, I feel like it's the best because you can get a long amount of time. You feel like you're with the character. You feel like you're literally like, not controlling them. I mean, you are, but you feel like you're a part of it if it's done well. And you feel like you get to experience the magic. And I think it would be great. I mean, the Fortnite thing gives me hope, but I think that was more of just to get people's attention.
Yeah, I think Mistborn as a game would be incredible. I just can't even imagine how it would feel to be able to use those powers, yeah, it would be so fun.
So cool.
It would be cool as a VR game.
Yeah.
Cooler than what?
A virtual reality game.
Oh, yes.
You would get so dizzy.
Well, you know, that's
The
okay.
interesting thing about Mistborn, though, my husband and I have talked a lot about this as a video game because we really want it, and we just talked about though we wondered if they would simplify the amount of powers you have, because we did wonder if it would be hard to pick up so many different things, like you got soothing and rioting and all that stuff, and so we wondered if you would be forced to play as like a misting for a while, like if they would change the dynamic and that you get to become a Mistborn maybe, even though that's obviously not how it works in the book. I wonder if that would be a game
I think
mechanic.
that you could make it. I think you can make it work. A game that, I mean, I talk about Ghost of Tsushima all the time, but you have like, you kind of have to choose. There's certain kinds of weapons. So there's like, you have the knives that you can throw at people. I think they're called kunai. And then you have like these sticky bombs, and you have smoke bombs. And then you switch between different sword stances depending on who you're fighting. And there's like so many different things. And you have a bow and arrow, and you have different kinds of arrows. And then I think Horizon Zero Dawn also kind of plays around with it. So I wonder if it would be more like you would have to like choose wisely, because there'd almost be like an MP meter where you can run out depending on like what you're choosing or something. And certain ones, you have a special meter for ATM or something. This has got to be so boring for anybody that's talking about video games, because you're like,
And then
what?
you would see people hunting for metals, you know, like I have to find some copper because.
Yeah, that part makes sense, right? You know, you have to like find the metal. You can run out of the metal. It has a very good like that mechanic I can see.
You should be able to go. I made this joke before that like, where do they get their mist cloaks? If they made a video game, there's got to be a shop, and you can like customize your mist cloak, because everybody, guy, girl, it doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Everybody loves customizing their stuff in video games, so we need that.
And it needs to have like the Dragon Age Inquisition level of facial, like you get to make how your character looks, so we can become the Mistborn. You know,
Yeah.
I need to make a character that looks like me, and I am now Vin.
That is awesome.
I feel like it's a fun place to. I don't know if I have any more to add.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I think it's a good place to end. So if there's no more questions or anything, then thank you so much to the chat for being so active and for commenting. And thank you, girls and Ben, for coming to this live show. It was so much fun. And then we'll see each other in 40 years to see how our predictions turn out. Or we'll do a panel on Tensoon or other Mistborn characters, or Stormlight characters, or whatever characters.
Cosmere characters.
Yeah, Cosmere. That's the word I was looking for. How could I not? What? Okay. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you soon.
Joanna.
And all these people's channels are in the description, which you probably already follow them. So if not, go do yourself a favor and subscribe to them. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.